Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe, and as always, I've got Sunny here with me.
Hey you, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving headfirst into something that's been making waves. Are there genuine concerns around stuff made in China?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see the news, maybe even recall that report from way back in 2019. It said almost 70% of Chinese electric car owners regretted their purchase.
That's me percent. Yeah.
70%. That's kind of nuts. It makes you wonder what's going on.
Absolutely.
We're swamped with info these days, so our mission here is to cut through the clutter and really understand what these concerns are all about.
Exactly. And this isn't about, broad strokes or pointing fingers. You shared a really interesting collection of information with us.
Yeah, a real mix.
We've got older news reports mixed with more recent stuff from 2023 up to this year. A fascinating YouTube video where someone's testing out self-driving tech firsthand.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting.
And even some details about regulations and incidents involving EV fires and buildings falling down.
Yeah.
It's a pretty diverse set of sources. A few different ways to look at this.
Right. It's definitely not a simple yes or no answer. So what we're aiming to do today is take an objective look at what these sources tell us about the worries surrounding products made in China.
Focusing on EVs, buildings.
Yeah, specifically electric vehicles, buildings, and maybe even a little peek at smartphones. We want to figure out the why behind these concerns, stick to what these sources actually say, and give you some solid food for thought. No taking sides, just trying to get a clearer picture for you. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So maybe we start with something that really jumped out from one of the articles.
Okay.
The powerful role of patriotism in what people in China decide to buy.
Ah, right.
Apparently, there's a really strong feeling that supporting national goods is patriotic. And this has become, even more amplified with all the trade stuff and sanctions happening lately.
Yeah, it sounds like there's this really strong push, maybe even a little nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to buy local. We see that in different ways in a lot of countries, but the sources we have suggest it might have a unique spin in China.
Well, what's fascinating here, or maybe concerning, is how this national pride gets used by businesses.
How so?
The articles we looked at suggest that if you're constantly hearing that buying local is the patriotic thing to do, it can be tough to voice any complaints if something's not up to scratch.
Right, because then you're not just criticizing a product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you do, you might get labeled as unpatriotic. And this creates a significant market distortion, really.
How does it distort things?
Because consumer feedback, which is, vital for quality improvement, it's effectively silenced by social pressure.
Oof. That's a tricky spot to be in as a consumer. You buy something, it's a dud, but if you complain, it's not just about a bad product anymore. It becomes loaded.
One of the sources even hinted that being unhappy with a product could be seen as disloyal to the whole system.
Wow. That's a pretty heavy consequence just for wanting something that works. So for you listening, you can see how this lack of transparent feedback could be a real obstacle in understanding the true quality of goods.
Precisely. And this is relevant to you because it highlights how factors beyond just the physical quality of the product itself can influence a market.
Right.
It's about understanding the whole environment where these goods are being bought and sold.
Okay, so this patriotism angle can potentially hide some quality issues. Let's zoom in on those quality concerns themselves then.
Makes sense.
Starting with electric vehicles, maybe? Since that almost 70% buyer's remorse stat was pretty shocking.
Absolutely. That 2019 report, as cited in one of the articles, claimed that nearly 70% of Chinese EV owners regretted their purchase.
Yeah.
With poor quality being a major reason. And the sheer number of recalls back in 2018, 135,700 vehicles.
Whoa.
It was about 10% of all sales. That really shows the scale of the problem back then.
10% recalled.
Yeah. And the reports of batteries spontaneously combusting. Well, that certainly wouldn't inspire much confidence.
No kidding. Can you imagine always wondering if your car is just going to randomly burst into flames? Yikes.
Right.
But it seems the story has gotten a little more nuanced since then, maybe?
It has, yeah. We have some more recent info from 2023 and 2024, particularly about electric bicycles.
Okay, what did that show?
Well, those numbers are actually pretty high for fires, like 21,000 in 2023 alone.
21,000? That's a lot.
It is, and still 4,402 just in July of 2024. However, and this is the key thing here, the rate of these fires seems to be going down after the government stepped in.
Ah, Okay, so intervention might be helping.
That's an important point. While those initial numbers are concerning, the downward trend suggests that, yeah, there are efforts being made to tackle the problem.
Right.
The sources also gave us some specific reasons for these fires. It wasn't just one thing.
Like
battery malfunctions, with thermal runaway being a big concern. Think of it like a chain reaction inside the battery that leads to intense heat and potentially fire.
Okay, like a domino effect in the battery.
Sort of, yeah. Also improper charging, including using non-standard chargers and what they call flying wires, which are basically extension cords.
Oh, I can see how that would be risky.
Definitely. Plus, different ways people use them, like parking versus charging versus driving, and just general electrical problems. So for you listening, this highlights the various factors that can contribute to these issues.
And the examples we saw are pretty serious. The fire in Nanjing in February 2024, that tragically killed 15 people.
Horrible.
And the apartment fire in Shanghai caused by someone charging a battery indoors that killed 2 lokes really bring home the potential dangers here.
Absolutely. These incidents underscore the human cost and the severity of the issue. Now, switching gears a bit to that YouTube video transcript.
Right, the self-driving one.
Yeah, it brings in another interesting angle, self-driving technology. The person in the video talks about a feeling of maybe overconfidence in this tech from companies like Huawei, Xiaomi, and BYD.
Yeah, that video was something else. You had people literally asleep while their car was supposedly driving.
I know.
Kids sitting up front with no grown-up while the car's in motion. It definitely makes you wonder about the level of trust, or maybe over-trust, some people have in these systems.
And what's particularly concerning for you, the listener, is the link the video draws to safety.
Okay.
There are reports of accidents involving these vehicles, and then sometimes those accidents are followed by fires and the door's not working properly.
Oh, wow. So a double whammy.
Exactly. So you have the initial accident, maybe tied to the self-driving system, and then quality issues like doors jamming, potentially trapping people inside if there's a fire.
That's terrifying.
The video mentions specific incidents involving vehicles from Huawei, AITO, BYD Denza, and Xiaomi SU7, which gives us some real-world examples. This is relevant to you as it raises questions about the reliability and safety features of these advanced technologies.
That sounds like a nightmare scenario. And it really ties back to those fundamental quality concerns we were just talking about.
It does.
It's one thing if your self-driving car messes up, but if you can't even get out after a crash, that's a huge problem.
A massive problem.
The sources also touched on how Chinese EVs stack up against EVs in other countries when it comes to fire risk, didn't they?
They did. And what the data suggests is quite eye-opening for you to consider. According to 2023 data from China's National Fire and Rescue Administration,
Okay.
the fire rate for Chinese EVs was reportedly higher than for regular gasoline cars in China.
Wait, higher than gas cars? Usually it's the other way around, isn't it?
That's what you usually hear, yes. But this data suggested the opposite in China at that time. And there was also a mention of insurance claim data allegedly showing BYD vehicles leading the pack for fire-related insurance claims among EVs.
Wow, BYD specifically. That's a pretty significant difference compared to gas cars. It really makes you rethink the idea that EVs are automatically safer in terms of fire risk, at least there.
It does challenge that assumption. And it seems this higher risk is being acknowledged within China itself.
How so?
Well, we saw information about various places in mainland China, hospitals, hotels, museums, actually banning electric vehicles from their underground parking lots.
Banning them from parking underground. Why?
The main reasons cited are how difficult it is to put out lithium battery fires. They burn really hot and can reignite, and the really toxic smoke they produce.
Okay, that makes sense from a safety perspective for enclosed spaces.
Exactly. And regulations in Shenzhen and a fire incident in Incheon, South Korea that led to similar concerns further highlight this issue for you. It suggests that the potential risks associated with EV fires are being taken very seriously in certain situations.
So, from people regretting their purchase to fire risks, potential problems with self-driving features, and even parking bans, the sources paint a pretty complex picture for you regarding the quality and safety of some Chinese electric vehicles.
Definitely complex.
Let's switch gears now and talk about buildings. The thought of buildings just collapsing is, frankly, terrifying.
It is. And the sources largely point to, well, poor construction quality and not enough oversight as the main reasons behind these collapses.
Any specific examples jump out?
The 2023 Kikar School gymnasium collapse. That's where 11 people tragically died. It's a stark example.
What caused that one?
The investigation found that the roof was overloaded because of illegally stored materials. per light, I think it was.
So negligence again. For you listening, this highlights the severe consequences of cutting corners in construction. And it doesn't sound like an isolated thing, does it? The sources mentioned another partial building collapse, this one in Bangkok.
That's right, in 2025, involving a Chinese contractor. Even though it happened in Thailand, the potential link to construction quality, as mentioned in the text, raises similar concerns for you when thinking about construction practices more broadly.
So even outside China, if the contractor is Chinese, there might be similar issues.
The source implied it was a possibility worth considering. These events point to some of the underlying issues mentioned. Not enough quality control, a lack of independent checks, and maybe not enough maintenance over time.
Right.
When you don't have proper systems in place, the results can be devastating.
So for you, it's about understanding the vulnerabilities that can be present. So with buildings, it seems to be a mix of potentially poor construction methods and a lack of strict oversight, making them more likely to collapse, whether from too much weight or even natural events.
That seems to be the picture painted by the sources, yes.
Now, we were also going to briefly touch on smartphones. We didn't see specific examples of widespread safety problems in the sources, right? Not like fires or collapses.
No, not in the materials we reviewed, but
given what we've talked about with EVs and the general buy national goods campaigns,
it's a reasonable connection for you to make. While the sources don't give us hard data on frequent smartphone malfunctions leading to serious safety issues, the underlying pressures we've discussed.
Like rapid production, focus on sales.
Exactly. Rapid production, possibly prioritizing sales figures over super strict quality control, combined with that nationalistic push.
Yeah.
It could potentially lead to similar quality control challenges in the smartphone sector.
Okay.
Even if the problems show up in different ways, maybe more like glitches or shorter lifespans rather than immediate safety hazards.
Got it. So a potential area of concern, but less concrete evidence in our sources compared to EVs and buildings.
Correct.
So we've looked at the patriotism angle and some of the quality worries with EVs and buildings. What other issues that we haven't mentioned?
Well, one of the most important additional issues for you to be aware of, I think, is the limitation on free speech and the lack of accountability for companies when quality problems do happen.
Right. We touched on that with the patriotism thing.
Yes, but it goes further. The articles we looked at detailed how if you criticize domestic products online in China, you could face censorship, your posts could be deleted.
Just banish.
Yeah. And you could even face legal action from the company or the authorities.
That's pretty scary. So if your brand new electric car catches fire or your apartment building has cracks, speaking out about it could get you into legal trouble.
That's what the sources suggest can happen.
That doesn't sound like a great way to improve things for consumers like you listening.
Not at all. The YouTube video even mentioned instances of car companies like Huawei, AITO, Xiaomi, and BYD reportedly suing people who criticize them.
Suing their own customers or critics?
Allegedly, yes. And the creation of anti-rumor centers to silence negative feedback further shows this kind of environment.
Anti-rumor centers. Wow.
So for you, this means it can be hard to get a clear picture of how good a product really is because negative experiences are being actively suppressed.
It's like a backwards feedback system. Instead of companies learning from criticism and getting better,
they just shut down the criticism.
That doesn't sound like it'll lead to better quality in the long run for folks like you.
It certainly doesn't seem like it would. The sources also touched on the issue of market dominance and maybe not enough competition in certain industries.
How does that play in?
Well, when local brands really control the market, as mentioned with companies like Huawei, Xiaomi, and BYD in some sectors, they might not feel as much pressure to really focus on quality improvements and good customer service.
Less incentive if there's nowhere else for people to go.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Also, the close relationships between some of these big national companies and the government can make it really tough for regular consumers like you to get fair treatment when problems do pop up.
Okay.
It's a situation where the power isn't really balanced between the consumer and these large state-connected enterprises.
And that leads right into the weak consumer rights protection that was also highlighted, right?
Exactly. Even if there are laws on the books to protect consumers, the reality on the ground seems to be different, especially when you're dealing with these big patriotic enterprises.
So for you listening, this means it might be harder to get your issues resolved if something goes wrong.
The article suggests that consumers often struggle to find effective ways to complain and might even face pressure from local authorities to just, overlook quality problems if they involve well-known national brands.
Just drop it.
Essentially, yeah. This lack of good options leaves consumers in a pretty vulnerable spot.
It sounds like this strong emphasis on national pride, while it might help sales at first, can actually create a situation where quality problems are hidden, and consumers who dare to complain face some serious hurdles.
That's a good summary of the dynamic described.
So for you listening, it's about understanding this dynamic might be at play behind the scenes.
Precisely. There's a real tension between this nationalistic feeling and just good old market sense. Some consumers might be more willing to overlook or excuse quality issues with local goods because they feel that sense of national pride, and might even see criticism as unpatriotic, like we discussed.
Which then makes it even harder for companies to get the message that they need to improve.
Exactly. This can further prevent open discussion and pressure for things to improve, which ultimately affects you as a consumer everywhere.
One of the articles also brought up this idea of, how do you say it?
Yes, it basically describes the state-driven economic model.
Okay, can you explain how that connects to these quality concerns for our listeners?
Sure. That term, Karo, basically describes an economic model where the government plays a very strong centralized role in directing and funding key industries.
Like a national project.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it as a national-level push with significant state backing. In the EV sector, this has led to really fast production, almost explosive growth.
Which sounds good, but...
But, as one of the articles pointed out, potentially too much production, overcapacity.
Yeah.
When the main goal is hitting production numbers and grabbing market share, there can be immense pressure on the companies to prioritize quantity over maybe how good the quality actually is.
Speed over perfection.
You could put it that way. This can also lead to really intense price wars, which can further squeeze manufacturers and maybe push them to cut costs in ways that could affect quality.
So for you, this means understanding that the rapid growth in some sectors might come with trade-offs in terms of quality control.
It's a factor to consider based on the sources.
So this push for super fast growth, fueled by government support, can accidentally create an environment where quality takes a backseat to speed and volume.
That's a potential consequence, highlighted, yes.
And it sounds like the rest of the world is starting to notice this too, maybe pushing back.
Yes. The article also briefly mentioned that other countries, like the US and those in the EU, are starting to resist Chinese EVs more.
With tariffs and things.
Exactly, putting tariffs in place. While having too many EVs on the market, that oversupply issue is a big part of these trade disputes.
Right.
The underlying concerns about quality, the ones we've been discussing, could also be playing a role in this growing resistance.
Interesting. So it's not just about trade figures.
It might be more complex than just that, and this could eventually impact the availability and price of these goods for you, the consumer, globally.
Okay. So looking at everything we've talked about, the patriotism, the specific quality issues, the lack of accountability, the state-driven model, what's the main takeaway for you, our listener, from all these sources? It's a lot to digest.
It is. I think the sources we've looked at together suggest that while China has made some really impressive progress in manufacturing, especially in newer industries like electric vehicles,
undeniably,
there are real concerns being reported when it comes to the quality and safety of products in certain areas.
Okay.
These concerns might be made worse, or at least harder to address, by a system that really pushes buying local for patriotic reasons, doesn't seem to allow much critical feedback.
The censorship and lawsuits?
Right.
Yeah.
And might not have strong enough systems in place across the board to consistently check quality and protect consumers effectively.
And that state-driven model.
Yeah, the government-driven economic model, while leading to that fast growth, can also create pressures that might inadvertently lower quality standards in the race for volume. So for you, it's about being aware of these potential issues woven together.
Okay. So what's the final thought we should leave you with today after going through all this?
Well, given all this information we've explored from different angles, it seems really important for you, the listener, to think carefully and maybe do a bit more homework when you're considering buying goods made in China.
Especially maybe bigger ticket items like cars or things involving construction.
Potentially, yes. It's about looking beyond just the price tag and maybe the nationalistic appeals, if those are present, and really considering potential quality and safety concerns raised in reports like these. Also, being aware of the potential challenges if you do run into problems seems wise. Ultimately, it's about making informed decisions for yourself.
Absolutely. So just to quickly recap for you listening, We discussed how patriotism is used to encourage buying local, the reported quality problems in areas like EVs and construction.
The fires, the collapses.
Right. The potential reasons behind these issues, like oversight or the state-driven model, and the difficulties you might face if you need to address problems like censorship or weak consumer rights.
And this leads to a really important final question for you to think about, maybe after we sign off.
Okay. Leave us with something to chew on.
In today's global marketplace, how should we, as consumers, balance national pride, whether it's our own or understanding its role elsewhere, with the very practical aspects of product quality and safety?
That's a good one.
And maybe what responsibilities do the companies that make these goods and the governments that oversee them have in making sure products are good quality, especially when nationalistic feelings are such a big part of what drives sales?
Yeah, where does that responsibility lie?
It's definitely something for you to ponder.
Definitely. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. A lot to think about there.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time.